Hello and welcome to Divisive Issues, the foul-mouthed, spoiler-filled podcast where two fans and two non-fans talk about comic books and graphic media, I guess.
And comic book history, I think.
And comic book history.
Or Sly does, at least.
But we're also going to be talking about, like, lesser known... Is Vertigo lesser known? I don't think it is.
It's a prestige, like, DC format. Like, if you know comics, you probably know Vertigo.
Yeah. I was trying to find a way because, like, what we've read is closer to something like almost like a graphic novel than a comic, but it's still a comic.
Wait, we gotta introduce ourselves.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, we gotta introduce ourselves. Hi, I'm Daryl. I'm the host. You can tell because Ryan's gone. He usually do all this.
I'm Sly, the only guy who talks about comic history.
Phil. I'm just forced to be here.
He's on his rocking chain right now. He's got his old whipping chain on him.
Yep.
Although this was a different read than most of the things we do.
Yeah, so getting into a little bit of the comic history I'm known for. Shade the Changing Man was created by Peter Milligan and Chris Bachalo. Basically, this was after like the initial wave of Vertigo, after like Alan Moore's Swamp Thing and Neil Gaiman's Sandman, the really prestige ones. But it was like still at the height of its popularity. And Shade the Changing Man actually was a character that existed before this run. He was created by Steve Ditko, the creator of co-creator of Doctor Strange and Spider-Man. And the original Shade the Changing Man series was very... we talked about how like Doctor Strange's art, the trippy art of Doctor Strange, like was very popular with people who did drugs. I have a feeling because the art of the original Shade was very trippy as well. So I have a feeling that's the same kind of story here because Milligan was probably on something when he wrote this.
100%.
But so Peter Milligan is another. It was called the British Invasion. I don't know if you ever talked about this because Alan Moore, Grant Morrison, Neil Gaiman were all British writers. So Peter Milligan is one of the lesser known British Invasion writers, but he's personally my favorite. And Chris Bachalo. He's one of my favorite artists of all time, but it's funny because I only recommend him in this specific era for like this book and one other book. Malcolm, the host of the owner of our network, actually called Chris Bachalo one of the worst artists he ever read, and it's hard to disagree with him. It's hard to disagree with him because his modern stuff, if you read his modern stuff, it's completely different from what he drew back then. It looks more like anime-esque. In a sense, the best example is remember that Cyclops costume when he had the X over his instead of a visor.
Yeah,
that was created by Chris Bachalo.
But to me, I'm like, I don't think it's that. I don't think that's that goofy.
But it's very abstract. While Chris Bachalo early on was more cartoony, I should say, not abstract.
Oh, I see. He's actually like. It looks like he got really stylized as it went on, where he's like, oh, this is how I'm going to do like figures and bites. Like it goes way further away from realism and just tries to make like a stylized, like comic, like almost cartoony style.
Yeah, but Chris Bachalo in this era was still trying to be realistic, but he infused some of his more abstract style into it as he went along. This was like the sweet spot for me. It's like George Lucas in the original trilogy before he went full George Lucas in the prequels for me. Like, but yeah. So getting into the story, just to briefly mention the original Shade again. The original plot of Shade was very like traditional superhero comic booky. It's about an alien from another planet coming to our dimension as a fugitive from another dimension. So very like standard superhero stuff. I bring that up because this does not start that way at all.
I was like, this did not seem like a superhero thing at all to me reading this.
Yeah.
Like, I actually was telling a coworker, I'm like, oh, I'm reading Shade the Changing Man because he knows comics. And he's like, is that the guy with like the purple trench coat or something? And I'm like, no, I don't think so. It's just some like I couldn't describe it. I was reading the second issue with JFK and stuff, and I'm like, I don't think he has a costume, but he's like, no, I think he does.
he does later on. We'll mention at the end of this story because at the end he doesn't put on his definitive outfit until the very end, but he does have. Later on, he puts on something that looks similar to like Joseph in Technicolor Dreamcoat. That's what people associate with Shade, but it's not really like a superhero costume. It's just a really trippy outfit he wears.
But even for most of this story, it's like this. It's so weird that I'm like, this isn't a guy with an outfit. Like he's just constantly changing personas and personalities.
He's a changing man, you might say.
Yeah.
And also, Shade the Changing Man's powers was he just grew into a monster. So it's very different premise from.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, when you were sitting, like, I had forgotten from the last time we had talked about this why we were reading this, so I just sat down to read this, and it starts off like completely different than any kind of like comic book story read. Once it got into when Shade appeared, it's like, okay, I can tell this guy's, based off a comic book character due to like all the kind of like goofy references he's making, but it feels very much like almost its own thing.
Very much
like
so.
You always complain about me being like, well, I gotta know the original stuff. It's like here, it's like I didn't need to because I felt like it had like no connection to it. And even when I went on the wiki and I saw all he did was transform into the big guy, it's like, okay, this is like its
yes.
mostly own thing.
Yeah, and I felt the same way. I've read all of this series, but I've never read any of the original series. So original Shade the Changing Man fans could hate on me, but this is shit I'm into.
The OG, how many there are? All 4 of them. one of which is Ryan.
So it's worth mentioning the Steve Ditko stuff though, because it opens with a woman named Kathy walking down the street, clearly very despondent and depressed, talking about how she's never felt more alone.
She's
in
more
her
than
life.
despondent. There's like people walking through walls and stuff, and she's like, "I'm crazy."
She looks despondent, but she says, "I've never felt crazy either." And she's seeing images that look like they're literally like Steve Ditko, like colorful costume characters walking around.
Yeah,
and a lot of these are the original Ditko designs, and this is like the most they use from it. But it's interesting that they use it as a sign of her being crazy. That there's people walking around in crazy.
Yeah, it's like there's like these weird like blue spirit apparitions floating around. The sky's green. It's purposely meant to like throw you off. That I have no idea how we're gonna describe some of the art in this as it was going on, because I felt like it reminded me of like the Ito stuff where it's like, this thing looks freaky. There's no way to like tell you how freaky it looks, but at least that we can be like, it's a fish with like mechanical legs. Whereas here, it's just like there's just things flowing in and out of each other, and Uncle Sam is a big skeleton that has America on his chest.
The best way to describe this comic for me is it's very dreamlike.
Yes,
and a lot of story follows a lot of dream logic.
Yeah,
and that's why I found it funny. Daryl was saying, when I told him it's only 4 issues we have to read for the day, he was so excited. Yeah, it's gonna be so easy. 4 issues. I'm like, I don't know how the fuck we're gonna explain what's gonna happen in this story, but we're gonna try.
I also didn't realize they're like double-sized issues too.
Well, the first one is, I think.
Anyway.
Yeah. So this woman Kathy is talking about how she's crazy. She's saying all these things, and she says it's her 23rd birthday, and she flashes back to her past when she was with her black boyfriend going down to the south to visit her family.
Yeah, her black boyfriend Roger, and this is the most like grounded it gets, is her explaining her past story, and it like you start to get involved in it because she's like, Roger thought we were we were crazy going down south to visit my parents at their home, and then they were half a day late there, but what did it matter, because they decided to take a break and go into a picnic field, and then they made love together, and so they were half a day late. So when they got back to Kathy's house, She opens the front door and she says, "Mom, Dad, it's me." And then you have like 6 panels of her saying that, just like the same frame. And
it's basically like time is frozen, and it's just not really frozen, but it's basically like time repeating itself. The narration keeps going on, saying she walked up the door. I walked to the drive, opened the door. A car engine backfired at distance. Next panel, I hadn't seen Mom and Dad in 2 months. And the narration continues, but it just keeps repeating her opening that door, saying, "Hey, Mom, it's me. Hey, Mom, it's me."
I thought that was really interesting, and I haven't seen that much in comics. I don't think.
Yeah.
Like a whole page of the same scene, but the narration changes.
Yeah, and then it opens to the splash page, which says Execution Day, and she sees her mom and dad being brutally murdered by a random psychopath.
Yeah, like more importantly, there's a guy with a knife there saying, "I'm not mad. I get mad, but I'm not mad." And it's like everything's done in red or in orange, just like everything looks like blood.
Yes.
And then the guy comes out with the knife and he's like, "You want to know why I did it? Why I did it? Because I want to, period." And then she's just in shock. She's just staring at him. And Roger, her boyfriend, tackles him to the ground. And as he's fighting
him... And then the police show up.
And the police are like, "Stop or I shoot."
Yeah, and they save the obviously the good person in this scenario of these two guys wrestling. And they shoot the black guy to save the white guy, even though the white guy was really the serial killer. And then,
and she mentions it was still the South in the narration.
I like this a lot because when they were going to the South, I was like, it's gonna be one of these like the town is gonna like mob lynch him or something. But I'm like, this is a way more realistic and not that lynchings never happened, but like
it's like what else is gonna happen in a small time frame that the story is gonna happen. Like
right,
it happens, but usually for a person that's been living in the community for a long period of time. But this is a scenario that can happen in a short period of time.
Yeah, right. You could say is coming from the perspective of 2019, looking back on 1990, we're like, oh yeah, this could definitely happen.
Yeah.
The cops shoot a black man, seeing an altercation going on between him and a white man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she like flips out after that, and she's like, it's a blur after that. I remember I howled and I howled and I howled. I howled for Mom and Dad and Roger. And she has to be taken to a hospital. And every night she sees like the killer come up, and she has to like stab him in the chest. It's all like all these like grisly drawings, and she was saying, I knew it was my fault. I'd killed Roger by taking him to the South. I'd killed my parents by being late.
Yeah, and she's like in the hospital being treated. She's basically like shut down for after that happened, and they basically said, and she says after she had to leave because when Mom and Dad's money ran out, she was too poor to be crazy, so that get the fuck out of the hospital. And that's basically what she's been doing ever since. She'd be walking around not sure what to do with herself. And she's going to visit the man who killed her family, Grenzler, because it's his execution day today.
You also get some nice things between there where it's like, oh, what happened to the money? But she met a greaseball businessman, and she ended up stealing from him when they went to like go to sleep at night, and she left. And it's small stuff like that adds like more character to her, where it's just like she's thrown like morality out the window because it's like nothing matters in her life when she lost the people she loved most. Yeah.
And so then we get a brief scene of Grenzler in his cell, basically just talking crazy, saying he
keeps repeating, I did what I did because I wanted to, period. He always just keeps saying that.
And he says how now he's famous. Like he's like very smug and arrogant, which is important because as he started preparing for the electric chair, he's still acting smug and arrogant as they're getting him ready and shaving his head. But then at the last, as they're about to strap him on, he starts freaking out, saying, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Please don't do this to me." Like now it becomes real for him. He stops acting like a smug psychopath, and now he's scared.
He was also, again, it wasn't just like smug, like, "What are you gonna do? Kill me?" It's like, no, I want to feel like the electric volts cranking through you. It's like that's the only way you feel alive, because he felt alive when he murdered people, but this will make him feel even more alive. And he even says it's like, I'm not a coward like those people that like try and admit that they did wrong and try and redeem themselves. And then when he's sitting in the chair, he's like, come on, I've changed my mind. Maybe I will reprieve.
Yeah, and then, because he didn't accept any, defense for himself. He's just like...
he wouldn't even get a lawyer or anything. He's just fuck it.
But now, he was like, I'm going to enjoy this, like Daryl said. But now he's just like, no, God, oh God. He's literally saying, oh God, please no.
And they have the tape over his eyes.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh God, please, I'm sorry.
Kathy's outside the penitentiary. She's like, maybe when he dies, I'll feel better. And also, she's she's imagining all the steps that are happening because she's like, I read up on what's going to happen to him today.
Yes. And so then, as they're about to, as they actually turn on,
they throw the switch, and they're like, "What's happening? Is it working? I can't smell anything." And then we just get lights coming off of him, and he becomes blue, shadowed in orange.
Dazzler's cast magic or whatever she does.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, it's just a light show. And,
I'm a comic fan now, so I can make that reference.
And one of the figures from the initial. Kathy's initial weird Steve Ditko delusions appears in the middle of this light show. Then Kathy sees the light show from outside.
So this is important earlier. I don't know if it's important, but it's interesting. Earlier, Grenzer said that he's seen the chair before, like a big black insect in the dark, the hood leaning back like it was laughing. And then the electric chair shows up in
to Kathy
with a face, with a hood.
Yeah,
and
so the hood is like its head, and it's and it looks like the sorting hat from Harry Potter, basically. Like it has a face on it.
Yeah, and it's it's interesting too, the narration as she's waiting out there. She's like 7 a.m. frying time. I looked at the penitentiary. I sensed something was wrong, and then the scream started, and that's when the colors too are like
trippy.
Pink and yellow and orange.
It does. There's this weird effect that occasionally they do sometimes that's really interesting that I have not seen, which is why when I was reading this, I'm like, I don't know how to describe this when there's no close analogs, where it's like there's digitized art in here. Like if you draw a line and then it changes to single block segments.
It's like low res looking.
low res.
But like even like super low res.
Like, it's like
it's not like JPEG. It's just like it's 2-bit. Yeah, there's just dots. It's
on
black
purpose.
Dots randomly scattered around. Yeah,
it's very bizarre. And she's like running.
And it's like the chair's like sketched in charcoal too, on top of like this pink background with these 2-bit dots.
Yeah, and so the chair comes to life with this executioner's hood head. It comes to life with the chair legs becoming like its arms, and it grabs Kathy and starts putting the hood on top of her, basically.
And she says exactly what Troy Grenzer said. "Oh God, no, please, no, I'm sorry." I'm like exactly his words. And then she's in the car
driving
with Grenzer in the back seat, and he's telling her, "You must drive." And his eyes are glowing red, and he's got like
pink, and he's got like
halos and like the light halos around his eyes,
like Cyclops' visors. When you take out the glasses, you see sometimes his red eyes, or kind of like that. So
it's like, "My name is Shade. I'm only using this body. I caused a localized trauma in reality when I entered it. I hope it didn't disturb you. This is Earth, right? I've come from the area of madness. Quite a journey."
Yeah, so this is Grenzer speaking, saying,
"Yeah,
I just use Grenzer's. I'm using Grenzer's body because he's gonna die anyway. So he's dead. Now I'm using his body. Don't worry. My name is Shade. I'm from another dimension. I'm here to. I'm sorry. I actually tore a hole in reality when I came into this dimension, and now everything's fucked up."
And in Kathy's mind, she's like, "I turned on the engine, put my foot down, drove off. Yes, I did. I did this with someone in the back seat who said he wasn't the person who killed my parents. Laughter? Sure, there was laughter." Laughter that said, "Jesus, Kathy, how come they let you out of the madhouse?" And he's just like staring at her. They run over a superhero, and
it looks another
Ditko
looking character, like a Doctor Strange looking character.
And Shade is like, "Don't worry, it's one of mine. Let's keep
going." He says he has an M vest. From
the M vest.
Yeah, from the area.
Like, oh boy,
from the area of madness, and the M vest made him do a warp reality by accident. And she's basically numb at this point, saying the M vest, of course, right? And she says like she feels nothing, so she's just going on with who she thinks is her serial killer, just saying all this bullshit.
And she brings him.
She took him to a motel, and she's basically like, "I'm gonna kill him. Like this is all like crazy, but I'm really gonna kill him this time. Finally, I can do this."
And it's great too. Is like at the beginning, she's with a drink, saying, "I'm gonna go kill someone," and you're like, "What the fuck setup is this?" And then now you're like, "Oh, she's killing this serial killer." And then she also says, "You can't kill someone without drinking." I read a pamphlet on alcohol abuse once. It just said alcohol turns into a different person. I thought, great, that's for me. but it was no good. You always wake up or sober up the same person with a headache. I was like, that's pretty funny. In a dark way.
So Grenzler's like on the bed. He's kind of helpless at the moment. So Kathy opens the door to his bed, holding a knife, saying, "Mom, Dad, it's me." And it's a recreation of that earlier panel that was repeated.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And as this is happening, there's a man from doing a recording from a local mental hospital.
Farmhouse mental hospital.
It basically says the screams. You can hear the screaming. And
the madness is escaping. His legs reaching critical mass hysteria. Can still joke. May as well joke now. You need a sense of humor when your legs have turned into worms. So his legs are worms, and
then his abdomen starts turning into dirt with flowers in it.
And he says, "I asked one of the patients what's happening. She said the scream had arrived. The scream that's inside me, you, all of us. The scream that's inside America. He's come to set it free. He's the American scream."
Yeah. So, and then he's trying to finish recording this, but his body's turning into plants, and then the nuclear bomb goes off at the madhouse.
But like a purple just digitized craziness again with the bomb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where, again, like the crazy imagery of a man's legs turning into worms and then his body turns into soil is like, it's really well done through the art where it looks as crazy as it sounds. Sometimes it looks even crazier than it sounds. Yeah.
And then
because of the colors.
Out of the dirt, bald eagle body comes out too.
Yes.
American Scream. So
then it cuts to the police, because now it's on the news that some kind of chemical explosion seems to have happened here. No one knows what's happening, so they call the police, and they call a man called Mr. Stringer to investigate. And he goes to the electric chair that Grenzler was put in, and they talk about how he floated and a light show happened, and no one really understands what actually underground. They have the body of the guy they ran over in the colorful costume, and he dissipates into nothing.
Mist. Yeah.
And Mr. Stringer asks for compliments, what's your opinion? And the guy says, Christ knows, maybe the world's just gone crazy. And Mr. Stringer just says, best theory I've heard all day. And so it comes back to Kathy about to stab Shade, aka
Grenzer / Shade.
Yeah, and she's like, "This time, Grenzer, I'm here to kill you." And he's trying to explain, "No, I'm Shade. I'm from the area of madness. Part of my soul force. The emphasis ties to me." He's saying all this comic book nonsense to her, and she's just like, "Well, whatever. I'm gonna stab you now."
And so she goes to stab. She stabs like next to the pillow, and he mentions too that Grenzer's not 100% gone. He keeps hearing this phrase about cold peanut butter, which is what Grenzer said the electric chair would taste like when you're being zapped. It's cold peanut butter.
Yeah.
And she stabs next to him. He's like, "No, I'm too weak to fight. Come on, I'm from a planet called Meta. I'm not Grenzer." And she keeps trying to stab him again.
Yeah.
And she's like, "That's me. That's my craziness. He said I was crazy. All I know is you're here. It's a second chance." And then as she goes to stab him again, she hears from behind her Kathy, and it's her mom and dad.
And she goes to hug them, and like her boyfriend Roger shows up, and they all feel real. So it's not like her crazy; they all feel real. But then, as she's hugging them, she notices blood on them, and she's not hugging Roger; she's hugging Grenzer, not Shade Grenzer, but another Grenzer looks exactly like Grenzer from that day.
Yeah, and then he cuts her like across the cheek. And she's like, "Shade, you gotta do something." He's like, "I don't know how, like, I guess I'm just like, I'm tapping into parts of me that are still Grenzer. It's combining with your thoughts too. It's out of control."
Yeah, so she's trying to, he says, like, he has no control of the M-Vest that's giving the power to warp reality. So he's unable to stop what's happening, but he's unconsciously basically creating it. And he's trying to focus and concentrate, and all what's happening is, Kathy, things get worse as Kathy ends up back in the house where her parents were murdered on that day with the house covered with blood. And she starts wrestling with the other Grenzer for the knife. She
takes the knife from him, she cuts off his fingers, and then she stabs him in the side of the neck.
And she's like, "Oh God, I think I finally killed him, Shade." But as she goes back to Shade, Shade is now floating in the air, pink and purple and teal, all different colors.
Again, it's really hard to describe what this looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the police, they stop and they have a minute to chat before the police break in. They say, "Oh my God, it's Grenzer."
To arrest Grenzer, yeah. They're like, "You're alive!" And then he shoots out the imagery of the executioner's chair at them.
Shade does that willingly. He uses that imagery from the executioner's chair that Kathy saw, and he uses it to make the cops run away.
And then afterwards, they get out into their car, and she's like, "You sleep in the back while I do all the driving." And she's like, "Where do I go? What do I do? I finally killed Grenzer. This might be crazy, but is it any worse than it was before?" And all she knows is that, like, Shade said, all the madness inside people's heads will be released, made real. So that's how our comic book of this series begins. This girl's escaping with her serial killer, but not him. It's a guy from another dimension now there's all this madness. The American Scream being released out into America and being made real.
And also, a important clarification, we said this is Vertigo. This guy's transitioned to Vertigo over time, but it started out as a DC book. So you could pick this up along your Supermans and Batmans. Back in the day.
That's pretty good. Especially these issues 2 and 3. I'm like, this is too bizarre. Like,
was this canon slide?
Is this in the DC universe?
It is. It is, actually.
Oh my God.
It's hard to explain. But actually, I have to say no. It's really hard to explain because Shade shows up and he acts like stuff from surreal, but I don't think it's actually supposed to be the modern Shade in the actual DC universe. It makes no sense why he's still around, really. So I'm going to say no.
Is it one of those where, like, old Shade was like canon or something, but they have him acting as new Shade just because that's what people know him as?
It's more as there's a new Shade, but he brings up stuff from old Shade. Like he brings up like Kathy from this series and stuff like that, even though Kathy never shows up. So,
new Shade, same as the old Shade.
And it's what was it? Daryl off mic talked about Kingdom Hearts 3. And how the creator of that brought in his original.
It's actually fairly big spoilers. I don't know. People might get mad.
Okay, but he's talking about how in Kingdom Hearts 3, a creator from from the story put in his original his original creation from another series into Kingdom Hearts, basically. And it makes no sense why he's there. It makes no sense why any of this is happening. That's basically what happens with Shade in the modern comics, because Peter Milligan puts him in a lot of his books he writes for DC. But it really makes no sense why he's there, how it fits into the old series. He just likes using Shade, pretty much.
Okay, so Shade's just like his pet character.
Yeah.
So issue 2, and this, like Phil said, this is when it starts getting crazy, and this is when, like, because they were just saying, like, the American Scream before, and I'm like, oh, okay, but no, it's like, it's the American Scream that's released.
Yeah.
Because this issue starts with the narration saying, there's a hole in the back of the president's head. The bastards that still run this country messed around with it. They patched him up and they dug new holes in him, and they made the holes in his head fit their story, but don't believe them. And it's about the Kennedy assassination.
Yeah, the issue's called Who Shot JFK?
Yeah, the cover is JFK with blood pouring down his head, and he's a sphinx, or something like that. So it's basically this guy going through these photos of the JFK assassination, and it's basically like tracings of the actual assassination. So they look photorealistic, these illustrations as he's going through them.
Yeah, it's from the Zev Truder film.
There's so many good. Like, I wish you should really read this, because it's like there's so much good narration that it's like we can't stop for everything. But like just talking, like the way they talk about the JFK assassination killing the soul of America. Like, there's a hole in the back of the president's head through which the heart and soul of America slowly trickled for nearly 30 years and still trickling, still oozing out its clots of slimy hope and innocence. He was the great American martyr, witness to the new age. He was the first president to be born in this century. He had to be killed, don't you see? He had to be assassinated, had to be dead before he could become a symbol. Alive, he was too human to be a symbol. And then, like, it's this guy in the room with this giant Kennedy for president thing.
Yeah, the narration is basically from the perspective of a conspiracy theorist who's been obsessed with the JFK assassination, and he looks like
he's been trying to write a book on it for like years now.
And he looks like what you expect conspiracy theorists to look like. He looks like an Alex Jones type, kind of pudgy, hair's a mess,
big beard,
his unshaven,
or like unshaven beard.
Yeah,
and the picture of JFK.
Starts talking to him too. He's like, "Who are you, Mister?" And he's like how he said, "Like, you're the only one that can lead us, JKs." And he's like, "Who are you?" And he's like, "I'm Dwayne Trilby."
He's talking to the photo of JFK, and the photo of JFK starts talking to him back, and then it starts poking out of the photo, like becomes real, like JFK's head.
It pulls him into the photo, and then he becomes Lee Harvey Oswald in the scene where he gets assassinated by Jack Ruby.
Yeah, so he becomes Oswald. He gets shot, and then wakes up.
He wakes up, and it's like, oh god, it's just a dream. I'm falling to pieces, falling apart. The goddamn scenes.
And then he's like, I gotta get out of my head. I gotta eat lunch. And then out of his arm,
a face starts forming.
Yeah, a little screaming face.
Yeah, and it looks, and then on the wall, it looks like somebody's skin is being stretched over one piece of his wall, like just flesh being stretched everywhere. It looks like,
and they keep repeating, it's like, Mr. Kennedy, you can't say Dallas doesn't love you. Like,
yeah, so the woman that says that shows up in his office. She kept repeating that before, but now that woman that said that to JFK says, "Mr. Kennedy, you can't say Dallas doesn't love you." And this is all this trippy stuff is happening. His arm with his face on it is explaining that he's the conspiracy theorist liberated dreams, his unfettered screams. And he says,
I don't want my dreams to be liberated. Our dreams are too terrible to be liberated.
And then go back to Shade and Kathy, and there's just like crazy sky happening.
Again, it's the digitized like drawings.
Yeah, and Kathy calls it mental pollution, like all the shit inside people's heads spilling out. And Shade says, so we have to go where that all that pollution is coming from, because I'm sent here to fight the American Scream. I'm supposed to fight the madness that he's creating.
They drive through a police blockade, and they're like, "They're gonna see you," grins like Shade, and then he's like, "Don't worry, I'll fix this." And then he becomes JFK. Like,
it's because he tries to concentrate. It's like you are the vest. The vest is you. Change, concentrate.
But he's picking up on the JFK madness, I guess.
Yeah, and then he just becomes JFK, and they're like, "Whoa, do you see this? This guy looks just like Kennedy."
Yeah, the police are confused. They're like, "What the fuck?" But
yeah, and Kathy's like, "Oh god,"
and she drives away.
She breaks through the police barricade, and the police are confused because they're like, the license plate is the one that Troy Grensler was using. But that's JFK. Like, what the fuck's happening here?
And then they run over the lady saying, "Mr. Kennedy, you can't say Dallas doesn't love you."
Yeah, her face is in the windshield as she's being run over, saying that.
Yeah.
And so now they're in the place where Kennedy was murdered. And this police just on duty, and they're like, "Oh, look at that fucked up shit. These people are recreating the JFK assassination." And there's a bunch of people in the JFK motorcade. It's the actual JFK motorcade in real life, just driving past these cops.
Yeah, and
they're like, "What?" And then they see Kennedy get assassinated. His brains and like skull explode all over the place. But then he's fine again, and they're like, What's happening?" And they're like, "I got brains all over me." And so then they try and go over to stop him, and one of the cops gets assassinated instead.
Yeah, all the imagery of the blood splattering, instead of JFK happening, now happens with him. Like, same exact imagery, but now it's the cop's head splattering everywhere.
it's like, man, and there's so much narration going on here about, like, JFK in that moment always will be, like, perfect. The smile of a sun god, his wife beside him, perfect. And, like, the click, the puffs of smoke, the halo, the spastic head, like, and then, like they're saying, it repeats for that other guy, and then the conspiracy theorist is like thinking this stuff like this.
He's a narrator. He's a narrator trying to say, "Oh, the JFK's perfect," but then it comes back to him, and he's JFK then he comes back to himself, and he's trying to write all this. As
and Jackie Kennedy is with him, saying, "I love you, Jack. Jack, they've killed my husband. I have his brains on my hand." And then he starts like a face starts coming out of his neck.
It's Lee Harvey Oswald, I think, starts going out.
Oh, yeah, it is. Because he says, "It wasn't me. I was just a patsy. If only I could have reported to the Warren Commission, but they wouldn't let me." Then one of the cops is dead.
So to go back to the cops, the cop actually got assassinated instead of JFK at one time. So now his friend's like, "What's happening? What the fuck? Where did the limo go?" And then the giant Sphinx. Giant JFK head
with a hole in his head.
Yeah.
A giant JFK head with a hole in his cranium just like pops out of the ground.
And when we say giant, we mean giant. It's like the whole block gets torn apart by his head. It's like
it's a building size.
Yeah.
And it destroys the pavement. And he says, "Who killed John F. Kennedy?"
And basically it says he's like the Sphinx.
Right, who's going to answer his riddle of who killed JFK? And
back to Cafe and Shade walking into all this, and the road is now just all digitized pixels now.
They're just flying through Mad Stream.
Yeah.
And then as they're flying through the Mad Stream, and he's explaining to him about this place,
he gets a sinister grin on his face, and she's like, "Shade, what's wrong?" And turns out the Grensler side of him, we're from the South, and he says, "I ain't Shade. Shade's gone, honey. Shade's history." And he starts attacking Cafe as she's driving.
Then the big JFK head goes, "Who killed John F. Kennedy?" and eats the other cop.
Yeah.
Because anyone that fails to answer its riddle correctly, it just devours.
And it's like, again, supposed to be this American thing. Like, says, this Sphinx doesn't strangle. This Sphinx is the Kennedy Sphinx. This Sphinx is American. It consumes. It eats. It's eating away at America. Children's eyes are covered, as they must have been on that day in 1963, as the country covered its eyes rather than look for the truth. But you cannot hide from the Kennedy Sphinx by covering your eyes. The Kennedy Sphinx will keep eating America until America answers its riddle. Who killed John F. Kennedy? It's just it's so insane, this whole thing.
Yes.
Yeah. It's about as crazy as, again, it probably sounds to someone who hasn't read this, which is probably a lot of people listening to this.
Yes, it is. That's why I love it, because it is insanity. The point is, the insanity of people is literally being let out, and Shade has to fight using power of insanity. And this is what insanity is like. This whole story is insanity, basically.
But it's also cool because it's also like an interesting kind of like deep dive into the JFK assassination, where it's not just like, you know, who assassinated him. It actually keeps bringing up different things about like who ran the commission afterwards that investigated it. Was it the CIA or the mob, or did the CIA help the mob to assassinate him? And it brings up like a bunch of historical evidence and like unknown like loose ends around the JFK assassination. So it's not just like someone using it just as a point.
It's more like Grant Morrison in Flex Mentality, where it's using crazy imagery and like symbolism, but it's trying to touch upon serious issues.
Yeah, and the anxieties around how much was unknown about this, how it shattered the American psyche, how there's so many possible people that could have been involved, that it ate away at Americans who are like, there's so many possibilities that it's like you go kind of crazy thinking if you think about it too much.
Yeah.
And
it feels both like applicable and fitting, and it doesn't feel as random as maybe if you just heard the idea of like a JFK head coming out of the ground, asking people who killed him and eating them.
Yeah, like I was always thinking, like, how would you guys react? Would you just focus on the JFK head and people would be like, this is stupid? But when you guys liked Flex Mental, I thought like you guys could probably enjoy this.
Oh yeah, this was. I'll get into that in my final thoughts about how I feel.
So the cops are like, what's real? They're kind of trying to figure out
not
the case.
not the cops from the town.
Oh right, the
cops,
FBI,
the FBI
guys.
people that are trying to investigate this. Once the Mr. Stringer and his associates.
Stringer's like, you know what's really weird? We found out that girl that was with Grenzer was actually the victim's daughter. Like, why would
the last people that were killed?
Yeah, like
were her parents.
Why would they be together? She has a history of mental illness.
And then he explains to the guy that he's his associate that he's like, I have cancer. My doctor says I'll be lucky to live within the year. Did you know that? He's like, oh no, I'm sorry. He says it's interesting. He believes that cancer is a wearing out of information, runaway cells who have forgotten who they are or where they're going, but it might be restricted to creatures or cells. Why not cancer of civilization? Why not cancer of imagination? Imagine a cancer of reality. And you're like, oh boy, this is what this is.
Yeah.
Who killed JFK?
Yeah. So Shade's struggling to come back. Like he comes back after Kathy's hitting him over the head.
Yeah, he pushes back to Grenzer's side, and he's like, "Don't worry, Grenzer's gone." She's like, "No, get the fuck out of my car! Like, you're not gonna shoot the Grenzer in my I'm not around. Get the fuck out of here!" But it's too late because they're already at the Sphinx, pretty much.
Yeah, and then Shade shoots like this glowy burst of energy
at
her that's all digitized.
Yeah.
To save this lady, and then the JFK head asks him, it's like, who killed John F. Kennedy? And then he's like, hold on, Kathy, I'm gonna try and fly. And then he like wobbles around in the air. He keeps like going up high and then low.
They end up flying at the sniper's perch but not where.
Yeah, Oswald shot at him.
I don't think this is where Oswald. I think this is where they suspect that a second shooter was.
Oh,
right.
Yeah,
because Oswald shot from the grassy knoll.
No, you got it wrong.
No, there's a second shooter on the grassy.
Right, other way around.
So Oswald.
Yeah, you got it backwards. This is Oswald's perch. So he goes to Oswald's perch.
Thanks, Seinfeld.
He goes to Oswald's perch and he sees what happened to the conspiracy theorist writer. He's just a bunch of heads now.
Yeah.
JFK's wife is next to him. The woman's saying, "Welcome to Dallas, Mr. President. Can't say we love you." Next to him. Papers are flying everywhere. JFK's head is all over the walls. And he sees the guy, one of JFK's limo drivers saying, "Oh my God, I'm ahead. I'm bleeding on the ground next to him." It's just complete madness in this room.
And they try and talk to him, and he's like, "Get away!" And then like light flashes out, and then suddenly Kathy is now Jackie Kennedy, and Shade is now JFK, and they're in the motorcade. And Shade's like, "Oh my God, I'm gonna be assassinated."
I'm JFK. I'm gonna get assassinated now.
This was the craziest part when they became Jackie and Jack.
That's why this reminds me a lot of like dream logic, because in dreams this happens all the time where like you become like what you're looking at a lot of times, like it's like this,
or like other people become other things too. A lot of the times you're looking at them, then it's like, and then you became my 4th grade math teacher.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know.
and we haven't mentioned. I want to mention this real quick. It's hard to find a good point to squeeze in any like points of discussion because there's so much crazy shit happening. But I do want to mention that since Shade's an alien from another planet, another dimension, he has no familiarity with JFK or anything. So he's like an outsider watching all the crazy American shit. Like he's like, you people assassinating your own president. Like is that what you Americans do? And And it reminds me a lot of Alan Moore with Swamp Thing. When we talked about it, we said a lot of it was Alan Moore as a British person analyzing American culture and going around saying, "Look at this fucked up shit in American culture," pretty much. And that's what a lot of this is. It's Peter Milligan as a British writer just doing the same thing, but with the JFK assassination as an outsider, looking at this weird conspiracy culture around this massive American event.
Yeah, that's why he feels connected to Shade.
Yeah,
and he always uses him. It's him.
I'm pretty sure it is. It's like a lot of Shade,
especially when we get to issue 4.
Yeah,
I feel like
so we pick up the 3rd issue with them about to be assassinated, or Shade
as President Kennedy and Kathy as Jackie Kennedy, and Shade's about to be assassinated.
And so the narration says, President John Fitzgerald Kennedy is about to be slaughtered, only he won't be, not this time. No clasping of torn throat, no lead-hewn halo of blood and brain, no assassination. I'm fed up with him being assassinated. I can't take it anymore. Trying to solve the riddle. And then this conspiracy theorist says, I've traveled back in time to save him, and he jumps on the motorcade and says, "Don't talk, Jack, duck." And the bullet misses him.
that's what I love is because you read it and naturally your first thing is like, Shade's got to find a way out of this. But no, it's the conspiracy theorist that saves him because he's tired of JFK seeing him get killed.
Yeah.
And he says, "You're too young to die, Jack." And they go back to the White House.
Yeah, this part is where it gets really serious because now it's like, what happened if JFK didn't get assassinated and he got saved by a random guy? And they're talking
a time-traveling conspiracy theorist.
And he's like trying to explain to the president. He eventually like tries to explain to the president that there's a conspiracy trying to kill you, Mr. President. I'm from the future. I'm here to save you. He's like telling him like what's gonna happen, pretty much.
Yeah, Bobby gets killed in a few years as well, and it's like, Bobby, Jesus, what about Teddy? And it's like, no, they didn't need to wipe Teddy out. Teddy was doing a fine job of it himself.
Yeah.
They go to Washington. They just like they have drinks together at night, and they're talking.
Yeah, they're planning to like. He's telling him, you gotta go investigate this CIA head. You gotta investigate this guy.
There's so much of like the American what I do appreciate, like how much they talk about like the American consciousness, like how this was before Vietnam, before Watergate, before crack, before AIDS. Like this stuff, like is from a time when people didn't feel like that stuff was weighing on them. Like how dark they could believe in something and be like, this is a good thing, and I'm not gonna. Like Vietnam was another like event like that, changed like the American consciousness and psyche.
And darkened its like spirit. And, at least like the majority thought of what they thought of America.
Right.
The white liberal image of America.
Yeah,
really.
like the 60s is when like the civilian view of America really started changing. Like the people who didn't go to war and saw the horrors of World War II. There's people who just thought things were swell and dory, but now you're seeing your president getting assassinated. You're seeing drugs on your street. Like the reality starts seeping in for a lot of people around this point.
Yeah, and so JFK asks him, it's like, why are you still so obsessed with me? I don't understand that. And he says, the conspiracy theorist is like, I had a daughter, Marianne, a beautiful little girl, so full of life, so perfect, but she wasn't perfect. She died when she was 7. 7 had this hole in her heart. I was already working on a Kennedy book, but then it became my whole life. So he used it, as a substitution for like thinking about his daughter to like push those thoughts away.
Yeah, it's trying to solve your mystery so I can forget the other mystery I could never solve. Why did Marianne have to die?
Yeah,
and then
he starts thinking in bed. He's like, I gotta make sure that I gotta tell him about all these things. Look after Martin Luther King and invite John Lennon to the White House. There's much to do. And then JFK goes to sleep with Jackie. Jackie's like, what happened to your body? There's like all these like weird scars all over this. And then JFK's like, no, it didn't happen like this. My God, Kathy. And Jackie's like, Kathy? Who's Kathy? He's like, oh my God, this isn't real. I'm not JFK. I'm Shade. We're in a mad world.
And then he like focuses and they're back in front of the Sphinx now, Shade and Kathy as themselves, and this conspiracy theorist is with them now, and he's like freaking out, saying, "I saved Kennedy, he's my buddy."
Yeah. And then she's trying to figure out that she's not Kathy. The Sphinx yells, "Who killed JFK?" And she's like, "Leave Harvey Oswald."
Yeah, she said which became Kathy. Which became Jackie. She felt as much as Jacqueline Kennedy as she feels Kathy now. Like, it felt so real. Like, she's stopping herself for a period.
Yeah, so she says Lee Harvey Oswald is the answer to the Sphinx, and the Sphinx just eats her.
I like that also, like, the dream that you guys mentioned, that, like, sometimes in a dream, like, you're like, this is real, like, most of the time. And it's, like, this... It's like when you're awake, you're like, this is real. So the whole dream I was about.
Yeah, what is real? What can you tell is real?
Because like there's a part of your brain. There's like a explanation for it. There's a part of your like a logic part of your brain that shuts down. So any kind of connection, you like emotional, like whatever kind of connection you can make, your brain just goes through it. It doesn't stop and think ever. So it feels as real to you as anything else does. And when you wake up, you realize it was all nonsense. But when you're in it, in your dream, it feels your brain,
you accept it as reality. Yeah. Where you're just like, oh yeah, this person's here, or you might think like, why are they here? But you just move beyond it.
Yeah,
the conspiracy theorist is now floating in like a lotus position.
In midair. With legs crossed, and then Lee Harvey Oswald like appears out of his mouth again, and then Shade's like, okay, to fix this, I must be plastic. I must transpose myself into a new and mad view of reality. I must be the changing man. And he turns himself into the conspiracy theorist's daughter.
Yes.
Yeah. So Marianne is there. Shade is Marianne, and he takes the conspiracy theorist and he says, we have to go figure out the Sphinx to get that nice lady out and get rid of the Sphinx. So let's go inside him. I'll show you who killed JFK. And Kathy finds a dead policeman in there, the one that he ate.
He's been ripped open. She's whole. Kathy's
so they ate the cop. They chewed up the cop before, but Kathy was swallowed whole.
And then she's like, where am I? And there's all these JFK heads, and there's all these guns that come out of the darkness, and she's in a JFK head shooting gallery. Yeah. So she's ducking to not get shot. And then Marianne is floating through the air with the conspiracy theorist, Dwayne, right? And she's showing him this is where JFK got assassinated.
The back of that was reliving the grassy that day with the grassy knoll again. But Dwayne's like, I don't want to see this anymore. I don't care about this anymore. Now that you're here, let's just go grab soda together. But Shade as Marianne's like, no, you gotta solve the Sphinx. You gotta answer the Sphinx. So like suggested before, like he was just trying to fill the hole his daughter left behind with the Kennedy stuff. But now that she's here, he doesn't want to do it anymore. So she's like pushing him as his daughter to try to make him solve the mystery of JFK.
Yeah, so there's like a ghost sniper on the grassy knoll, 2 of them, and then
it keeps going out. Like Kathy jumps off into like this deep blueness to get off the conveyor belt, and
the fire galley.
Then Stringer, some cops are like, Stringer, look out of the helicopter.
Stringer's in the helicopter flying towards where Shade and the others are, and they look at the helicopter and they see what looks like Uncle Sam, but like it feels a skeleton. Yeah,
with a blue rose on his jacket, and then like his heart, and under his heart is just all these faces of just people.
Yeah, beneath his ribcage too.
A broken ribcage.
and he's like a gigantic, like the helicopter. It's like a massive splash page, and the helicopter's all the way in a tiny corner, and you see this giant skeleton Uncle Sam. He comes swimming most of the page.
Yeah, and so Kathy lands near a sleeping Marianne, who's not the Marianne that Shade is.
It's a real one.
The Marianne that Shade is leading Dwayne through. Now, like, everyone is like a sniper, basically, like a ghost sniper. There's like hundreds of them.
It's basically like any conspiracy theorist is shown here. Like any kind of conspiracy idea of who killed him is here. Pointing a gun at him.
Yeah, they're like, it was
from the mafiosi to the American Daughters of the Revolution, the KGB, Ku Klux Klan, FBI, anti-Castro units, CIA, the mob. So often behind it all, the CIA and the mob.
Yeah, so you see all these ghostly snipers just on the grass, all pointing their guns at JFK.
She's just like explaining to him like different rationalizations of how everything happened, what happened with Jack Ruby, what happened with Lee Harvey Oswald, like how he knew it was being set up.
Yeah.
And Kathy's talking to his daughter in bed, Marianne.
The real Marianne.
And she's like, here, you can take like this doll. My daddy gave it to me the day I floated and went to heaven.
And she says, like, Marianne, is this you, isn't it? I mean, you're not just part of the madness. And as she says that, she's back in front of the Sphinx. Meanwhile,
they're going into dead Marilyn Manson's not Marilyn Manson's, Marilyn Monroe's. Jesus.
Yeah.
Dead Marilyn Monroe's everywhere. There's like lots of truths here: booze, flesh, sex scandal. But it gets so messy, and he's like, I don't want to see this anymore.
Look at that! It's Psychic Kennedy in the White House.
Psychedelic Kennedy. Psychedelic. Him on LSD.
Yeah, so he's like, what if President Kennedy lived? Like, he was using drugs. We're the first like psychedelic president. Imagine that reality.
Yeah.
Turned on president, leading the states to decades of love. To some that was unimaginably terrible.
Yeah, so they soon after JFK was shot, the girlfriend said to Larry they couldn't control him anymore. He was changing too fast. Within the year, she was dead. Want to go deeper? It gets weird, and he's like, no, I don't want to go.
And so Shades, as the girl says, you saw a documentary once. A practice quite common among primitive peoples all over. It's called killing the God King. The king is a god. The tribe makes him a god, but they're scared as divine powers will desert him. And the tribe. Keeping all the gods on the tribe's side is a major concern. So after a period of time, the god king is slain before his divinity wanes. And Dwayne says, but all the present assassins, the shadow of the creature behind them. And the girl says, shade the shadow of you and me. And the soldier and the sailor and the candlestick maker, America. And America is all of us. The sum total of what we are and what our precedents were. JFK was American god king. America made him. America slayed him. And he says, what about the real killers, the mafia, the CIA? And she says, the mob and CIA are just the high priest, the guardians of America's divinity. Which is usually green and comes in a picture of Mr. Washington on one side and words in God we trust on the other. And it's like when everything turns white now, and Dwayne says, is that it? That's all there is? And the answer to the riddle? And she says, I'm sorry, I never said you could be able to make a bestseller out of it. So basically, we all killed JFK like as a God King figure. Yeah. Touching back on what you were saying before, like as he was back then, it was like him in his perfection before reality struck in and his power waned, basically.
Who killed JFK? America killed JFK. So then They teleport back to reality. Shade is Shade again and not the little girl. And the conspiracy theorist starts freaking out. He's like, what have you done with Marianne? He's like, I just changed into her. And he's like, change back. I don't care if she's not real. Just change back into her.
And then he's like, I'm sorry, I can't do that. Then the conspiracy theorist says, then you gotta be put to sleep.
And he becomes
Jack Ruby.
And Shade becomes Oswald getting shot by Jack Ruby in that picture.
Yeah, it's like literally the same pose as Oswald getting shot. Then
you have the Sphinx asking him who killed JFK, and he's like, America killed him. America.
Yeah, the conspiracy yells at the fucking Sphinx saying, "God damn, America killed it. America killed him." Okay, you got the answer, and the Sphinx goes away immediately after he says that.
And he says, you know, I'm sorry, your friend's gone, but he left me with nothing. The real mystery is why did Marianne have to die? And she's like, there's no mystery. She had a heart defect. Maybe 100 years she would have lived, but 100 years ago she wouldn't have lived a day. There's no mystery. It's just life. And then
she takes the doll, Marianne's doll that he gave her, throws it at the conspiracy theorist. It blows through his chest.
Like a gunshot wound.
Yeah, he's like, what's happening? It's like a shotgun blast wound. What's happening to me? My stomach hurts. What's Kathy? And it's Shade, and he's alive. And the guy dead on the ground that was Shade was the conspiracy theorist. And Shade tries to explain it to her, and it's just like,
okay. He said the explanation, quote unquote, is he realized that the conspiracy theorist was going to kill him, so he swapped places. So he became the conspiracy theorist, and the conspiracy theorist became him. So that way,
but he didn't realize he was the conspiracy theorist.
So he killed the conspiracy theorist as Shade. Whatever, doesn't make a lot of sense, but
yeah. So Shade shot Jack. He became Jack Ruby and killed the conspiracy theorist.
Yes. And that's how he's trying to explain like this fucked up mentality. Mr. Stringer shows up in helicopter saying, "Do not move, stay where you are." But then
they try and run away together again. Then Shade's like, "Wait a second, I think I remember. I think going so deep into the madness vest has activated something. My home planet, Meta, the madness. Putting on the vest. Hold on." And then he starts to like, go into magic state again, think about stuff, and then he becomes like this 2D cardboard cutout silhouette that's all orange and
yeah. So it looks like cardboard. Physically it's like a cardboard silhouette, but the design, like the color of it, is like the pixelated crazy skies we saw before.
Yep. And then Stringer shows up and says, "Nice to meet you guys," and she's holding this cardboard cutout of him.
Yeah.
Yep.
What an awkward way to meet Mr. Stringer as a cardboard cutout.
What an awkward. I feel like awkward doesn't begin to describe becoming that 2D image of yourself.
Yeah.
Like, it's just kind of incomprehensible. You're not like, ooh, do I need to wait a bit?
So as we get to issue 4, I really want to bring this up. Every cover of Shade the Changing Man is a work of art. Like, if I had the money, I would buy the single issues of the series and put them up as just pictures on my wall, because every single cover is basically some abstract, illusionist kind of art. It's very like psychedelic. It's psychedelic without being like the Ditko levels of like craziness. Like this is like LSD nightmare psychedelic of stuff like melting all the time. Yes. So then, last issue has nothing to do with the JFK stuff, but I wanted to do this one because it sets up Shade. Because for most part during the story, Shade had no memory. We forgot to mention that. His memory was gone. He was just trying to piece it together as time went on, and this is where he finally starts remembering who he was as a child and what his backstory was. I remember I was a child once, a strange child, as young as 7. I'd stare at sunsets and shed a few tears, though I couldn't say why. Too sensitive, they said. I wore loud cravat and read poetry, not the modern regimental choriambic quatrains, but the old pre-sacred looser, more passionate, more flawed. It's like, because it's like, again, he's part of like this alien world, so stuff is always going to be like whatever's weird to him he takes for granted. Yeah, so it's his narration, and you should see his life flashing back as he's like going through this reality warp hole, like a whirlpool, as he's being twisted and torn into it. And his backstory, so his design until now has looked like the original Shade, but this is where we see Shade as Milligan really designed him, with long red hair. He looks like a fucking hippie, like he is hippie. Yes, that's what the thing is. He's a sensitive poet type. He looks like, actually, now that you mentioned that this is a British invasion, he reminds me of like he could be in the Beatles or something. Yes, he really could be. So he explains how he was in love with a girl named Rado, and he basically like watched her as she sleep, and she snuck into
he pulled an Edward Cullen from Twilight and just stared at her as she slept. But then she woke and she's like, "Father, I'm being attacked." He's like, "No, I'm only looking at you. I love you. And then he gets grabbed, and then he gets sent
to the holy surgeon for the sacred laser to lobotomize them, I guess.
Yeah. So basically, in his role, like basically being too sensitive to romantic is bad. So they basically lobotomize you to become more robotic. And I
like how they use like sensitive and romantic to describe like what we would call like maybe like mental defects. Like, you shouldn't have done that. That was like an aberration, or that was something wrong that you did. Instead, it's just like he was just too sensitive. Yeah. That's so we have to correct that.
That'll touch upon this saying Shay just seems like Peter Milligan. But if you read a lot of Peter Milligan's stuff, he has a lot of his protagonists are literally like people that are too sensitive and they get crushed by the world around them.
There you go.
And to the point when he writes X-Force, which is an X-Men spinoff, Peter Milligan's main character is literally a character called Mr. Sensitive, whose power is he has very sensitive skin, but he's also too emotionally sensitive. So they actually have a scene where a person dies and he starts crying, and people on the team are saying, "Wow, look at this fucking bitch just crying like a bitch over here. Fuck him."
Someone's got issues. Just like Mark Millar or whatever. Everyone. Yeah. I guess
at least it's like we don't have to live through the cooking issues. With the sensitivity stuff, I can relate to that.
Yeah, I was about to say, you're like, I understand this.
Yeah, I understand. So as Shade's like recounting this, he's actually inside of this like mud world where it's just raining mud all the time on him, and it's up to his like ankles. And he sees Kathy outside of the human like silhouette that he was. It's sort of like if you in the cartoons, if someone runs through a door, they just make a silhouette of themselves. And he sees like Kathy through it.
I think this is the madness realm, right?
Yeah, he says so. He sees American Scream. American Scream says he's in the madness realm, but he sees the silhouette. His silhouette is basically like a portal between the madness realm and the real world. I mean, the Earth.
Yeah. And the American Scream is like, before I'm done with you, you're going to be reduced to nothing but a mouth. No memory, no soul, a faceless, mindless mouth, screaming alone in the dark after Twilight's last gleaming for all time.
And he looks just like what we said before was the skeletal Uncle Sam. I am the American Scream, e pluribus unum, one out of many.
And so, meanwhile, while this is happening, so Shane's basically being put. He says like he spends centuries just in this mud hell world from his perspective, just being tortured and being absorbed by this mud, being like traveling.
It's like over his eyes. He becomes like. He starts to look like.
It almost looks like he's kind of like melting.
Yeah, he starts to look like he's like from I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. Like
yes. Yeah. And so as it's happening, we see what's actually happening in real time. And it's just Kathy got arrested by the FBI, and she's with the silhouette of Shade, and she's like trying to talk to it, saying, "Shade, are you there?" But Shade's going insane in this mud world, just screaming in the dark.
Yeah, I love how they put her in a silhouette of a man that's like spazzing out in an interrogation room.
And they specifically say it's like, are you okay that she's being locked up with that thing? And Mrs. Stringer's like, it doesn't seem to bother her. She seems fond of it. And she's like, come back, Shade. And he hears it. He's like, come back, Shade. Oh, God, that voice. Hot, salty tears burning open my muddy eyes. And starts to recall more stuff about like him after he had gotten his confirmation when the laser zapped him.
He says I used to stare at flowers, rage at death, cry at sunsets. After my confirmation, I was too sensitive for that. I rolled at college, took my occupational personality test, cried no more sunsets. I was a dull little bastard like all the others. So then he went to college, and when he was in college, one of the Ditko-looking guys from before show up in his bedroom and basically says, "I'm Wisor, Change Master," and I believe this was a character from the original series. And he says, "You are to become if you go into your shower curtain, you will enter Earth." And they go to the shower curtain, and you see like the reality is being warped in this shower curtain, like everything's like bending and twisting.
And he basically is like, I want to prepare you to become a changing man so you can go into Earth. But they don't specifically say what a changing man does, and Shade doesn't know either. It's like, for 2 years I studied learning rudimentary astral projection, how to be sensitive to and locate the unseen ways.
But they explain that it's better that you think on your feet and not be fully aware of everything. That's the explanation they give him anyway, saying it's better you learn as you go, basically.
Yeah, and as he started going over to Earth for like a couple hours at a time, he started to fall in love with its wildness, its chaos, its life.
He visits Earth temporarily, but Weiser explains how Earth is basically just complete madness. And the madness of Earth, because they don't lobotomize their people to be completely robots. Their madness is seeping in, and is now endangering all of the universe, including Meta, the planet they're on. And so to get to Earth, he has to go through this area called the Area of Madness to reach Earth.
And so he has like a fiance now, but he doesn't really talk about her that much.
And then as he's flashing back, the American Scream is talking to him. He basically reveals to Shade that he got sold out. And he shows him, because when he put on the M vest, which is like the thing the changing men wear, basically when he went to the Area of Madness, his physical body actually died. And
because he's asked for projecting himself into Grenzer's body because he had to take over the body of a dying man, and so his real body is back.
Your body will be okay, and when you get back, you'll be free. But in reality, they threw his body in the
Area of Madness, and it got withered away. So he has no body he has no physical form to return to. He's stuck in Grenzer's body now, Shade.
And so there's all like these mud people attacking him.
It's actually Grenzer's victims, right?
Oh, right, yeah, because
he's like, they're part of you, your sensitive soul wrapped in a butcher's apron. And then
Kathy comes through, and she's like, Shade? And he's like, her voice, calling me back from despair, the power of madness, the power of love, sweet bird of youth, on the smithy of my soul. And so then he starts to, like, eradicate everything with his, like, Shade magic powers.
With his reality warping powers, basically.
And he slips through the silhouette with Kathy, and they appear somewhere else, and the original silhouette turns to dust.
Yeah, so the sequence of events was Kathy went through the silhouette because she suspected Shade was there, so she went through the cartoon style hole that Shade went through, and when they both exited, now they're no longer in the prison, and the prison silhouette is gone now.
Yep, and now they're near Phoenix instead of Dallas, and so then they go to a hotel, or they get a motel for them, and he's tired and he has to sleep, and he goes into the bathroom. This is where like Kathy starts to realize that she is having like feelings for him, even though he looks like the man that murdered everyone she loved.
Yeah, she's like, we're gonna get involved, and he's like, I guess we are. We're gonna bang. Like he says, shit, that's going to happen, isn't it? It shouldn't. It's crazy. But I always know it's kind of like an internal alarm. It's ringing like mad now. Oh, this is her saying it, actually, not him.
Yeah.
And then
my mother always said I was crazy. And he's like, what was your mother like? Like you? As beautiful.
Yeah.
So after Shay leaves the shower, he turns out he has his original hair back, his long red hair. And so then this is why the look that Phil suggested is the first appearance of that look, because now he's wearing the trench coat. He creates his own outfit using his madness powers, and it's basically like an orange trench coat, like circles and crazy patterns over it. And this is like the design he wears for most of the comic. This trippy trench coat looking design.
And yeah, they basically go and they're like, we're gonna just take everything slow and see what's happening. And they go and they sit on these cliffs in Arizona, and they're like, it's beautiful. And
I try not to, this is Shade's narration, I try not to think about what's happened or what will happen or about Troy Grenzer or the Shade or the American Scream. I try to be a piece of the scenery, as still as the mountains or the sky. I look at the dying sun bleeding over the rough horizon, remembering sunsets on Meadow when I was young. It almost makes me want to cry. And then that's how, this is where we end off.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then I looked because I was like, what else can you do here? And I did not realize this is 70 issues. And I was like, oh, wow. Yeah, that is... Does Peter Milligan stay on the whole time?
Yeah, so Chris Bachel and Peter Milligan both stay until issue 50. And then they want to end at 50, but DC was like, this is selling too well, so you have to keep it going. So it goes on to 70. After 50, it gets... Like, it's funny because this is the most normal the book is. It gets weirder and weirder from here.
I can't see how it gets weirder.
It gets way weirder. This is the closest it comes to have like the American Scream. So the reason why I want to do this is my favorite comic of all time. Like literally my favorite comic of all time. Mm-hmm. And this is only the first story arc is collected. The American Scream story arc. So only 3 trades. So the majority of
really?
Yes. The majority is not collected. And I think it's a shame because I think the stuff past that the Mega Scream arc is amazing, but it's the closest the series is to being a more traditional superhero story, because American Scream is like a clear villain and she has to fight him. After that, it becomes way more looser in its plot structure.
Does it kind of become like one of those, like, I'm trying to think, almost like a Swamp Thing thing where it's just the two of them walking around and just solving other people's problems?
That's how it starts. That's actually how it starts. As it becomes, this is minor spoilers, but as it becomes deeper and deeper in, Shade becomes more and more insane. It becomes more about him fucking up people's lives.
Huh, that's interesting. Boy, what I'm just looking at some of the art of some of these. Yeah, what a read. So it was one of those, like, I feel like had I not read Flex Mentallo first, I think I would have been more floored by this, but especially, like, because I read up because I was like, who is Peter Milligan? I feel like you guys, I mean, Sly, obviously, since you love him so much, you probably mentioned him before, but I was like, I haven't heard anyone mention him. I'm like, where did this guy come from? And then I saw that it was British Invasion. I'm like, okay, Grant Morrison and Neil Gaiman. I'm like, okay, this makes total sense that this guy, like, came around that time, because it's a very, like, similar style. That's like the only knock against it, is that it's like, it's similar. It's sort of like if you've read one of those guys' type of writing, you get another, like, feel for it here, but it's still really good. And I had a lot of fun reading it. It's one of those where I'm like, I would want to keep reading it, but I need to take like breaks between issues, because it's a lot, and it's just like really crazy in the fact that you don't have a lot that you can ground yourself with. Kind of like with Flex Mentallo, where you're just like, I don't know what's real versus what isn't real. And so your mind's racing a lot as you're reading it and trying to fit everything together, trying to understand the messages being, like, laid out to you. But it's still like some premier, like, great comic stuff.
What do you think, Phil?
I really liked it. I mean, the JFK stuff was my favorite, but overall, I liked the style. I liked the art. It was crazy, but like you said before, not for the sake of being wacky. Like, you can just make something just insane and not have any purpose to it, and it's not very satisfying to me. But I found that it was crazy in a cool way. Very interesting, starting with the execution, going to the JFK stuff, and then him talking about, when he started talking about his homeworld stuff, I was like, this is less interesting to me, where he's like, I'm just an alien, where they lobotomize people. So
the good news is, that's like the last time they, like, really, like, ever, like, as it goes on, they, like, never go back to meta. It's it never becomes a meta versus Shade story or anything like that. Like, it becomes more and more about just Peter Milligan exploring Shade and the people around him and their mental issues.
That's cool.
That's interesting, because even when it went to his backstory, I still thought it was, like, interesting enough. Because I like, even though it's more like almost generic-y comic booky stuff, even though it's like, again, lobotomy isn't like a generic comic book story, but even if when it was like more normalized, it's still like Milligan's writing was really good, so it kept me like enthralled in continuing the story. And I like the sequence of events. I like how much he was trying to flesh Shade out there, like him breaking into that girl's room just to stare at her because he loves her. It's like that kind of stuff just like tickles my fancy.
It was really cool. I thought.
This is, I don't want to be an asshole, Sly, but this is one of those things where you're like, this is one of my favorite things. I'm like, I can definitely see how that is, and like, I feel like this is a really good thing.
As opposed to those things where you're like, you're fucking stupid, Sly.
Or sometimes you're like, I love the Max, and I'm like, really? The Max? Or Punisher 2099, I'm like, really? Punisher 2099?
It's funny you dissed the Max, because I feel like the Max prepared me for this, because the Max was really trippy too.
Yeah, I guess I could see that if you read the Max first and then you go to this, it's a stepping stone. But this is way more down my alley. I enjoyed this.
Yeah, I think Shade's way, like I said, my favorite comic of all time, and I recommend other Milligan stuff too. Another book I recommend while we're talking about Peter Milligan, The Enigma, which is another great book. It's only 7 or 8 issues, and it's about it's also really trippy too. And if I explain the plot points to you, it'll be like the Sphinx JFK head where you're like, fuck you, how can I? But basically, it's about, but the Enigma is basically about this kid. He starts seeing on the news this superhero from a comic he used to read as a kid has basically become real and starts like stopping crimes. And it's basically stories about him investigating, like why is this superhero that, and basically like an obscure superhero that only he knows. Basically, like if I like me. If only Shade the Changing Man became real for me, basically. Like a very obscure superhero that only he knew. And he's trying to track down the writer and stuff like that, and learn more about it. And it gets really, really weird. It gets reality warping just like Shade the Changing Man.
Cool.
It's cool.
I when I was looking at the Peter Milligan wiki, I saw that one of the other famous stories he wrote was Ecstatic. So I'm like, okay, no wonder why you and Ryan have such a boner for it.
Yeah, that's the X-Force series I mentioned. Mr. Sensitive is part of X-Force/Ecstatics.
It's definitely one of those, like, when I hear these ideas, I'm like, this is so dumb. But then I see the writers, like how much like Ryan loved Grant Morrison, how much you love Peter Milligan. I'm like, okay, these guys know there's stuff. They can write good stories. So now I'm on board with whatever garbage comic book nonsense they want to work with.
It's funny, like, it's sort of like this podcast is the whole journey getting to that point where you're like, maybe the premise can be salvaged if you have a good enough writer on it.
Yeah, it only took like a couple of years. And an artist. That's the other thing I forgot to mention too, is I think the art here was one of the most unique bits of art we've actually seen maybe in the medium. Especially thanks to the colorist.
I agree. Chris Bachalo, the colorist, Daniel Vozo, like everyone did a really good job here.
Yeah, and it might be just because I'm reading like some Prometheus comics. I'm like, Geiger had such an inimitable art style, like no one can imitate him. Mm-hmm. And as I was reading this, it's like, I can't think of any close analogs for this yet. Maybe I just haven't seen it yet. But that's one of my favorite things is when you get to see art done where, like, I could feel like people could imitate this, not that it's imitating something else. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's really fascinating.
Very cool.
And I think that's definitely, like, half of the appeal of this is just, like, how wild it gets and how well drawn it is.
Well, just like I said, I really feel the fact that it gets so weird really makes it live up to the premise of this guy fighting the forces of madness. The art does that too. If you didn't have art that really conveyed that fight with madness, I don't think it would have worked as well either.
Mm-hmm. Cool. They should collect trades of these. Maybe I get them.
They really should.
Anyway, that's been it for us. I hope you've enjoyed this journey. I hope, if this interests you, you could go pick it up. If not, well, sometimes we dive into the unknown.
Thanks for listening, and I killed JFK along with you and everyone you know. I mean, I didn't kill you. You killed JFK with me. I mean,
I'm you killing me, killing you.
I thought I was Sly killing me, but I was really me getting killed.
And I've been inhabiting a serial killer's body and crying at sunsets. I guess, right? That's how it works.
Yeah,
Staying continuity.
Yeah. Staying continuity.